We know the Seattle Kraken record isn't great. We know that the Seattle Kraken don't have a great record when they are on a back-to-back, but can they create some magic knowing that the Oilers might be a little bit tired, not to mention depleted? Let's talk about it on today's game day episode of Locked On Kraken.
You are Locked On Kraken, your daily podcast on the Seattle Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, what do you say, Seattle hockey fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Kraken, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where we bring you your favorite team, the Seattle Kraken, every single day. Erica L. Ayala here, your host of Locked On Kraken, and if you're an everydayer or an OGer, you know I absolutely love baseball. So for those of you celebrating opening day, opening weekend, enjoy. I've been listening a little bit more to Locked On Mariners. Interesting conversation for the draft of Sticking the Flag or something to that effect. I don't know. Colby and Ty will know better what's going on there. But had a conversation about my guy Kirby. The reason I'm a Kirby fan is because not only is he from the same county where I basically grew up in New York, but he also went to the same undergraduate school that I did in Elon University. So always have a special spot in my heart for him, hoping things go a little bit better than they did towards the back end of last season. Anyway, let's talk some hockey. First, I want to give you an update. On today's game day, we did see Chandler Stevenson on the ice for the Seattle Kraken, and in a regular jersey, not a no-contact jersey, but Dan Bylsma did address that. We are not expecting to see Stevie on the ice today, but he did say that seeing Chandler Stevenson back on the ice for morning skate and for practices is a good indication of the positive progression happening there. So we will still see a few of the younger guys, including Wright and Matty Beniers, take up the mantle. Talked about that a little bit yesterday. A lot of the conversation again today with Dan Bylsma talking about Wright, yes, being able to eat up some minutes, but specifically talking about Matty Beniers on the penalty kill. And we talked about it, whether it's because of the injuries, definitely because of the trade deadline moves, and also just kind of where the Seattle Kraken are, not officially eliminated, but getting closer and closer every game. Things are going to look a little different for this Seattle Kraken team. And, Dan Bylsma once again talked about Jared McCann in that respect. And, that he's got to play some hard minutes. But as I mentioned on yesterday's episode, it was a late night episode, but I did talk about Jared McCann as well as Beniers and Brandon Montour and Wright. Can they all get to 20 or more goals this season? And I talked about that on yesterday's episode because I personally would love to see it. So no Stevie again, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some things, once again, that the Seattle Kraken are going to look to work on, get some guys more activated and things of that nature. With the Stevie injury, if he can get back, the Seattle Kraken, this is game, number 73, I believe, for the Seattle Kraken. Yes, game number 73. So we're coming down to the wire here. If he can get back on the ice for the next handful of games, sure, of course, why not have Chandler Stevenson back? And if this is something that becomes a little bit of an issue, I wouldn't be surprised if it's a little bit of an extended break. You don't want to rush Chandler Stevenson back. There's really no need to do that for the Seattle Kraken team. Again, the team is not in the playoff hunt right now, so you don't have to worry about it from that perspective as far as getting Chandler Stevenson, one of your Stanley Cup winners, back on the ice. But I'm sure also you got to think about, as we hear with Philip Grubauer a lot, right, that you want those reps. If you can get them, you want the reps. And we have the off season coming up here. Eventually, there will be no more games to play for the Seattle Kraken. So I think it's going to be interesting to see. It doesn't sound like there's any indication that Chandler Stevenson won't be able to return this year. Again, him being without the no contact jersey is a good sign. But again, I'm just curious how things play out. We have also seen this season, right, Kraken fans, where we had seen players return to the ice, and then we see perhaps there was a setback, or the diagnosis was a little bit, or the prognosis was a little bit different. So I'm just putting that out there because it's something to talk about with our Seattle Kraken. But again, I don't expect that to be the case with Chandler Stevenson. But he is the only player that we have out of the lineup per the game notes that came from Kyle Shahora and the rest of the crew. Also, shout out to Kraken Home Ice. Was it Kraken Home Ice? It was definitely on King 5. I don't think it was on the latest Kraken Home Ice episode, but King 5 did a feature on Kyle, and there's a hilarious clip in there of Joey Decord kind of ribbing Kyle, and then King interviews Joey, and he's like, yeah, I was giving him grief because he's always coordinating and setting up interviews for us, and so now we gotta make sure he feels it a little bit as well. So I thought that was really fun and funny. And as a member of the Tegna community, we want to be able to, especially as we march closer to the off season, just reflect on the Seattle Kraken season, including the new broadcast partners. So our hope is that we'll have some of those clips that we can share for those of you who listen on audio platform, as well as, of course, here on YouTube. Speaking of that, if you're not already subscribed, please do subscribe wherever you listen or watch podcasts. Well, if you're watching, I guess on the King 5 website, but probably on YouTube overall. And also the Locked On Network, we're really leaning into the ticky-tock of it all. For those who know Black Rosie Media, which is my company, you've probably seen me post on TikTok and other platforms there as well. But now we have a Locked On Kraken TikTok account. I've been pretty quiet on Twitter/X, moving more to Blue Sky. We don't have a dedicated Blue Sky account for Locked On Kraken, debating on whether we want to do that. But we definitely have a TikTok account. So if you want to see Locked On Kraken content on social media in small bites, and maybe YouTube isn't your vibe, definitely check out TikTok. You can see that I have it there. It's simply Locked On Kraken on TikTok. Coming up on today's game day episode, I'm going to go over some things that we should know about today's game day. Again, the Seattle Kraken have never been great on their back-to-backs, but what does it say that Edmonton is coming in on a back-to-back? And again, a pretty depleted team. We heard from Jaden Schwartz on what he'd like to see the Seattle Kraken be able to accomplish tonight, knowing that they've had some problems, some difficulty getting past Edmonton this season. That's coming up on today's episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken brought to you once again by our friends at Trade Coffee. If you're like my mother, your mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee. I got tired of trying to pick with terrible accuracy what my mother likes. She's actually coming to Tulsa to visit. She left some coffee from the last time, so I guess she liked whatever she grabbed last time. But also, I've been able to go through Trade Coffee, which is some next level coffee. It's the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the U.S., bringing fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. The experts have taste tested thousands of coffees, curating 450 amazing roasts. And what I was able to do is, because I do know my mom's likes for the most part, I took the trade quiz, and in under a minute, they matched me with roasts that were fresh, smelled incredible, and that my mother really liked the taste. I sent her some already. I have some here in Tulsa for her. She's definitely a whole bean kind of gal. She likes to be able to grind her coffee beans at home as opposed to get the coffee pre-ground. That's her vibe. And, getting that first bag was a game changer. As I said on yesterday's episode, definitely rising up the ranks as if I wasn't already at the top. as far as favorite daughter. It's between me and my two sisters. So I like my odds. I like my odds. So right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/locked on NHL. That's drinktrade, TRADE.com/locked on NHL for 40% off your first order. Drinktrade.com/locked on NHL. And thanks as always for making Locked on Kraken a part of your daily destination. Erica L. Ayala here. And listen, the Seattle Kraken taking on the Edmonton Oilers once again. Now, this will be the fourth and the fourth and final game, yes, of the series. We took on Edmonton January 4th. That was a 4-2 loss at home. Then we had another 4-2 loss, but up in Edmonton on January 27th. The last game was a 5-4 loss for the Seattle Kraken, and that's the one that we heard Jaden Schwartz talk about a little bit today. He talked about today after morning skate that this Seattle Kraken roster has had a little bit of difficulty with the Edmonton roster. We talked about it after the last game, Edmonton missing some pieces, some key pieces, of course. And we also saw that, I believe it was Bob Condor who wrote about the game for today. It was Jeff Baker, and saying in his piece, which we'll go over a little bit more here, but the Oilers minus McDavid and Draisaitl, don't get caught up on that, because what Jeff is saying is that some of the difficulty that the Seattle Kraken have had as of late is because we're taking penalties, which I completely agree with. At the numbers just in the head-to-head for tonight's game, that is an area that the Seattle Kraken need to be able to improve upon, is just not only the amount of penalties that they're taking, but also how they're able to bounce back and be able to be on the penalty kill. And so if we look at the stats for today's game, here you go. The penalty kill, 76.7% for the Oilers. So on the one hand, the Oilers, they're not really much better on the PK than we are. We're at a 76.4, but it's the power play that's a little bit different. 25.5% for Edmonton to 19.5% for your Seattle Kraken. That's a 5 percentage point swing there. And what we hear or read from Jeff Baker is, without McDavid, without Draisaitl, you still have to worry about Nugent Hopkins. And if we look at on NHL.com, the head-to-head here coming into this game across the last 5 games, it is Nugent Hopkins that leads the Edmonton Oilers in points. He's got 9 points overall. Jared McCann is leading the Seattle Kraken with 4 points. Zach Hyman has 4 goals in the last 5 games for the Edmonton Oilers. Jaden Schwartz has 2 goals in the last 5 games, leading the Seattle Kraken in that span. And it's Mattias Ekholm with 5 assists in 5 games. So 1 assist per game average there. Jared McCann, though, of his 4 points, 3 of those are assists. So again, he's one of those players I talked about getting to 20 points or 20 goals or more. Would love to see Jared McCann continue to score or continue to get on the score sheet, but also to score some goals. But again, he's playing some of those hard minutes, as we heard from Dan Bylsma earlier today. So that's been a little bit of the difficulty. And Jared McCann, though, he always seems to be a player that he is going to play and do what the team needs. He's definitely thinking about the name on the front as opposed to the back. So I don't know how much that's bothering him, but it certainly is something that's kind of bothering me. I've been saying it all season long that I just really want to see us open up McCann to be a little bit more of that goal scorer. But, what can you do? Let's continue on here with some things to just keep in mind ahead of tonight's game. 2-11-1 all time, your Seattle Kraken against Edmonton, including a 1-6-0 mark at home. So The odds are not in the Kraken's favor, but here we go. We heard from Jaden, as I mentioned, who leads active Kraken skaters with in goals, with 18, assists with 18, and also points in a team high 34 career games against Edmonton. So once again, looking to the leadership of Jaden Schwartz. Dan Bilesma was asked about Jaden today, and he talks so much about his leadership and the type of leader that Jaden is. If you were an everyday or in an OGer, I've talked about, I guess I can get rid of that now. I've talked about Jaden and his leadership, and I like the kind of leadership that we get from a Jaden Schwartz. I think you absolutely need it for a team, whether we're trying to get young players through high draft picks, whether we're trying to get the draft picks and the prospects that we already have excited and playing the right way. Jaden Schwartz, along with Eberle, I just don't know that you get much better than that when it comes to who we have with regard to the Seattle Kraken. Now here's something that I want to talk about. I did a little bit of a stock up, stock down. Some of our young guys, I felt that maybe there was a little bit of plateauing going on, but Kaapo Kakko enters tonight's contest 1 point shy of matching his career high of 40, which he set in 22-23. Also 5 goals back from his career high of 18 set that same season. So Kaapo Kakko has been someone who we've seen his numbers definitely rise from what he was doing with the Rangers this particular season. And now he's also starting to get his groove back when it comes to his career highs. So he's someone that I would love to see just really open up his game, get activated. Adam Larsson, 2 goals shy of matching his career high of 8 goals, which he met on 2 other occasions, both with your Seattle Kraken. Jamie Alexiak, 9 points in 26 career games against Edmonton. So someone who maybe has their number. He also just brings great size. And one way to slow down speed is with size. So looking forward to seeing what Jamie Alexiak can be. Your Seattle Kraken in their notes have Matty Beniers as a player to watch. And I ever since Jessica Campbell came on the program and told me that 2025 is the year of Beniers, I'm totally down for it. He enters tonight's game with assists in back-to-back games, 4 points, 1 goal, 3 assists in his last 4 games, dating back to March 18th. 40 points and 23 assists in 72 games this season, is tied for 4th. His 17 goals are tied for 3rd among all Kraken skaters. He has 5 points and 4 assists in 10 career games against Edmonton. And Matty B, I did break down that, again, a little bit of a defensive breakdown, 3-on-3 in overtime against Calgary, but I still think this is a guy that we want to get going. He is one of the candidates to be a 20 or more goal scorer for Seattle this season. So, hey, why not start against Edmonton? We're absolutely going to need him. I mentioned it, but Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is definitely the player to watch on the Edmonton side of things. So the Seattle Kraken, I mean, again, I know not everyone wants to see a slew of Kraken wins in these last 10, 11 or so games. I think that I want to go actually to a comment. And we've been going back and forth on this whole kind of tanking situation. But I do want to go to, I love the comments that we've been getting here. We've got George Costanza, 3343. Thank you so much for just being an active commenter on our YouTube page. George saying, I don't think Team Tank is a monolith. And I think that's important. I don't think either Zame or I have necessarily been saying that. We just end up on opposite sides of the spectrum when it comes to the comfort, when it comes to the term tanking. And there was also another comment that we had that said, hey, I guess tanking and how comfortable you are with tanking depends on how you define tanking. And so, yes, Team Tank is not a monolith. Yes, there are some that want to tear it down and coordinate a multi-year tank. I think the majority of Team Tank are simply rooting for losses the last few weeks to improve draft position, not for the team or coaching staff to intentionally lose games. And I think it's a little bit of a slippery slope here, right? Because I think there are people that argue and that will say, hey, this front office maybe did everything that they could do to eliminate the the possibility of the Seattle Kraken winning more games than the last at the time of the trade deadline, 20, 25 games, something like that. They've done what they could do to eliminate the likelihood that the Kraken will win more games in their last 20, 25 games than they will lose. And sure, I'm down with that. I think that is a resignation. It's not necessarily team tank. The thing that makes me uncomfortable is that there are elements of the conversation when it comes to hashtag team tank where people do want the active roster to not put their best foot forward. That's the part of the tanking spectrum that for me gets really uncomfortable and cannot be a recipe to success in my very strong and not so humble opinion. And so George Costanza 3343 goes on to say, let the kids play. I mean, we've been talking about this for we talked about it last year. We talked about it again this year. I'm totally with you. Let the kids play. And we're going to talk about Kraken home ice in the next segment, and it'll come back to that a little bit. Worry about developing the youth. I am with you 100% there. After the draft, work towards improving next year, an 11-game tank. That is all. All right, George Costanza 3343. I'm with you for the most part. I'm still, I just, there's just certain words. I'm not going to repeat some of them that, maybe they teeter on obscene for some people, but they're just words in the English language and dictionary. There's certain words that for me just kind of, they give me hives. And in the context of sports, tank is one of them. So anytime we lean into tank, I just want to reject it absolutely 100%. And I thank you for bringing out and bringing up that tank. The term hashtag team tank is not a monolith. It's not one way of doing that. From what the Kraken are saying, I don't think that they believe in team tank. We keep hearing Dan Bylsma say these guys have something to prove. He keeps saying it. Jeff Baker, Bob Condor keep writing about it because he keeps saying it. So we're not getting that vibe from the Seattle Kraken. So if you want to say there's a spectrum of tank, again, I would say I still am not comfortable using the word tank. I do think there's a resignation and an understanding that this team will not make the playoffs. And that gives an opportunity to George Costanza 3343. Dang it, I was so close. Okay, George Costanza 3343, to your point, yes, that means leaning into development. And like I said in the comment to you directly on YouTube and in some other comments, yes, I'm all about that. I'm team dev, DEV. I'm not team tank. Yes, lean into the youths. I want to see it lean into the youths, lean into some of the guys, even like a Mikey Easyman. I've been liking talking about Mikey. I'm still getting to know his game, but the sandpaper factor, high on the sandpaper quotient for sure. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And then also Easyman was a part of one of the most recent episodes of Kraken Home Ice. And I want to get into that as we close out today's game day episode of Locked On Kraken. Today's episode of Locked On Kraken also brought to you by our friends at Indeed. You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. When it comes to hiring, Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job posts seen on other sites. Indeed's sponsored jobs puts your post at the top of the page to help you reach the right candidates faster. And I've been in a situation where I'm looking for the right fit for a role. I've also been in the situation where I'm looking for the right fit as an employee. And when you have a resource like Indeed that can make sure that the post is seen by people who have the skill set that is going to help you reach your goals, it's a total game changer. So now you can speed up your hiring process with a $75 sponsored job credit. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring Indeed is all you need. All right, Seattle hockey fans, spring has inevitably sprung mostly everywhere in the United States. For some of us, that's 50 degrees. For others, it's more like 78. Okay, I'm in the latter group. It's about 78, 80 degrees here in Tulsa. It feels mighty fine, not gonna lie. But either way, as I mentioned, for those who celebrate opening weekend for Major League Baseball, wishing you well, hoping the M's have a great season. And we'll see about my Mets. Yes, I am a Mets fan, a Seattle Metropolitans fan. I just love their history, but also, yes, a New York Mets fan. And so I'm looking forward to a little baseball. We got to have Everett back on the show. I told him I'd get him back on the show to talk a little baseball. Let me see if I can work that out. You know who else loves baseball from your Seattle Kraken is John Forsland. I talked to him once just casually, and seems like he was really looking to get after it when it came to baseball. I think as a player and then maybe even in media. So we might have to have John to tell that story because I just thought it was fascinating. But hey, you tell me you love baseball and I'll tell you, hey, have you got 2 or more hours to talk? But anyway, let's get back to the hockey of it all. Kraken home ice. Now, this is something through our Tegna partners, of course, at King 5, and it's just all these different features. There have been features on our goalies, Philip Grubauer and Joy Decord, talking about mental health. Recently, I talked about women in hockey, the celebration of women in hockey at CPA, and there was an amazing feature talking about Linda Kahn, of course, Piper Shaw, Allison Lucan, and Jessica Campbell. I mean, we could really go on and on. And there was also on Kraken home ice. So they did a little bit on the feature about Isimon, but then they also talked to Cale Fleury, Yanni Newman, and John Hayden about what it takes to just be ready at the drop of a dime, just at the snap of a finger, to go from Coachella Valley to the Seattle Kraken, which all 3 of them have been able to do, of course, including Newman, who is among Melanson, Stezka, and Coco to make their NHL debut this season with the Seattle Kraken. So I thought that was really a nice feature. We heard, I think I heard John Hayden speak more in that feature than I ever have, whether I was in person or watching video of John in a media scrum. So well done by King 5 on that. But he said, of course, his goal is to spend more time in the NHL. Time after time, every call up. And he also mentioned the facilities are great, the people are great, the environment is great in both places. But there was also a feature on Mikey Isimon, and not necessarily talking about the sandpaper quotient, the P&V quotient, the moxie that he brings to the ice, but the fact that he's doing this while navigating through Crohn's disease, which is basically an inflammation in your intestines and things of that nature. And so I thought that was a really interesting nugget and wrinkle, knowing that just how Isimon fuels up is a little bit more thoughtful perhaps than other people, knowing that he's dealing with Crohn's. So I really appreciated the features that we've been getting through our partners at Tegna. And again, Isimon talking a little bit and opening up a little bit about Crohn's and when he found out about it, how he's been managing it. So if you're not already tapped in, I definitely recommend Kraken Home Ice. And there's so many other resources. Again, we're going to tap into those a little bit more, but it's a game day, Seattle hockey fans. We know that Edmonton's on a back-to-back. I want to see if the Seattle Kraken can get a little bit of a spark. And I know not everyone wants the Kraken to win these days, but I go to what Dan Bilesma said. This is still a team. These are still a group of players that they have something to prove. And I think one of the articles that we saw up on the Seattle Kraken website, this one also by Jeff Baker, is thinking about how the Seattle Kraken are playing down the wire, especially against Stanley Cup contenders. And Edmonton obviously was one last year. They're dealing with a little bit of trials and tribulations internally and what that looks like for them. But what is the measuring stick? What is the marker? And that's kind of what this article by Jeff Baker is talking about. This is the sub headlines. If the Kraken want to measure where they're at, that will happen this homestand with visits by Edmonton and Dallas, teams they haven't beaten in a combined 13 straight regular season contests. So again, still things to play for. And if you want a measuring stick, yes, you want to do that against Stanley Cup contenders in the recent years, including Dallas beat us in Game 7, right? To make a conference final. That means to me, again, the maybe the true version of Team Tank where players are holding up, we can't afford that. What we can do, though, is give some of our prospects the opportunity, or as we would hear from Ronnie Francis, every opportunity. I love when he says that. We're going to give our young guys every opportunity to show that they can make the NHL team, they can crack the NHL roster. Well, these are the kinds of games where we need players like Isiman, we need players like Hayden, we need players like Evans, Wright, even a Matty Beniers to truly step up. Does that mean that the Seattle Kraken are going to win the game? It doesn't guarantee that, not even in the slightest. But we need these games to know and test the mettle of some of the young guys who want to step into larger roles. And that's what I think the rest of this season is all about. So it's a game day. I hope you enjoyed tonight's game. A reminder, try to be kind to yourself. And in extension, you can then be kind to one another. Let's hold fast. Let's stay true. And loud and proud we say, as the Seattle Kraken wrap up their March homestand, let's go Kraken. I'll catch you on the next episode where we'll do a little Firebird Fridays. Peace out, everybody.